So when you're stitching a straight line using a saddle stitch, which means you have one long thread with a needle on either end, and you're weaving the stitch in and out of the holes. That's a saddle stitch. So when you're doing that, it really doesn't matter whether you go from the front to the back or the back to the front, as long as whatever option you choose, whatever is most comfortable for you, you repeat that every single time. The same goes for when you're passing the second piece of thread through the same hole. If it's above or below the thread, the first piece, that's going to change it up too. So you want to always go from the same direction and then pass the thread over or under the previous one. So here's what I mean by that. So we have our two pieces of thread coming out through the same hole. I go from the front of the piece, or really from the left side to the right. So I'm going to go in from the front to the back. I'm going to drop that piece down because I'm going to take the thread in the back and I'm going to bring it up and over. Oops, I'm stuck. Up and over that other piece of thread and then pass it through the hole from there. That way the loop's on the top and this piece of thread is on the bottom. So when that pulls through, you're going to pull them opposite directions. That's going to really line them up to keep your straight line. So again, all of those that I just did, you have to repeat that pattern. So front to back. Then when you go back to front, pass it over top of the first piece of thread. And then when you're tightening it, the front goes forward, the back goes backwards, and repeat. Oops. Now the thread that I'm using, I just got from Tandy Leather today. This is the first time that I actually bought the Ritza, I don't know how to pronounce it, the Tiger Thread. It's the sizing that I got that they have at my local Tandy is just the 0.8 millimeter. I'd prefer a 1 millimeter thread because I like to use the 1.2 millimeter stitching holes with a lot of the patterns that I use. But with the 0.8 millimeter thread, I went with the 1 millimeter stitching holes. So it's just a fraction, it's just 0.2 millimeter difference, but you're going to end up with the thread being a lot more appropriately sized for the stitching hole, and you're not going to have any gaps or loose stitching. Also, this thread is a gorgeous color of purple, so I like to use the closer together stitching. So again, for most of my projects, I use a 6 millimeter spacing. For these, I'm using a 4 millimeter spacing. So what that gives me is a much tighter stitch with more stitches close together to really let that thread be used as an accent piece, not just a functional piece, but I like to use my threads as accent colors to the piece. As you'll notice for this, I'm not even stitching anything to anything, it's just purely for accent. But this thread color is gorgeous against the black. Another thing I noticed about the Tiger Thread is the way it's waxed. I'm not sure what the process is or what they use, but the first thing I noticed is as I'm sliding the thread through, it feels almost like it has a rubbery, vinyl-y texture to it. It's really smooth, really satiny almost, and it's really nice to work with. Where some of the other threads that I use regularly, they're heavily waxed, and when you put it through the hole, it starts scraping the wax off. You get wax pieces everywhere. I usually have to wash my hands like 4 or 5 times, or else I can't even grip the needle anymore. So this, whatever wax process they use, not only makes the thread really soft, it doesn't make the thread a lot thicker, and it doesn't get everywhere. Now, price-wise, it is about twice the amount of the normal threads that I use. What Tandy's standard wax thread that they have, their 1 millimeter thread, which I love, I use all the time, but this is about twice the price, and for the color, for the sleek finish, I really think I'm going to convert over to the Tiger Thread. With what I'm stitching here, it's a again, it's a 4mm spacing with a 1mm hole. For that, with the 0.8mm thread, you're going to want to use about 2 times the stitch length per side. Meaning, when I measure out how much thread I need, if this is a 10-inch strip of leather, I'm going to need 20 inches for the front and 20 inches for the back piece. So I make a total of 40-inch cut of thread and put a needle on either end. And then with that repeating pattern, your stitches are going to line up perfectly and have a nice straight stitch line.